with Marion and Fraser Robinson.
My father was a stationary fireman his whole life, worked the same job until the day he died. And my father was the oldest of 5. My mother was the middle child of 7. And my father was the rock for so many, not just us, but for his brothers and his sisters. He was a giver, you know. I say in the book that he believed that time was a gift you give others. And he gave and he gave and he gave. He was that person that everybody would gather around in his recliner. They would come and bring the girlfriends so he could check them out, and they'd ask him for advice. And he was a visitor, you know. He visited everybody. And oftentimes he dragged me along with him on a Saturday where I would be sitting on some plastic sofa, you know, the feeling, some lady's house with a little cup of 7-Up, and I would listen to them visit. But my dad was a storyteller, and he was courageous, and he also had MS, which was only part of his story, and probably something I didn't realize that he struggled so mightily with as a young person, because my father was somebody who wasn't going to complain. You know, he wasn't going to seek professional help for his disease, which was a frustration to all of us. He was going to get up and go to work and earn a salary, and we were his world. He invested everything he had in us and any other kid that came his way. So I learned to be a storyteller. I learned to be a listener. I learned to be a giver from watching him. And then there was my mom, Marion, who is, as I describe her in the book, she just had a Zen neutrality in her ability to parent. And she taught us responsibility at an early age. She was the kind of mother, I think we were about 7 or 8 when she gave us alarm clocks. And she was like, you're gonna wake yourselves up. Because as my mom said, I'm raising adults, not babies. So she taught us how to think for ourselves at an early age. And I think the thing that I want to share with people, I've shared in the book, that I want to say about my parents is that they valued our voices from an early age. We were not shushed. We were allowed to speak our minds and to ask questions. They encouraged our curiosity. They told us the truth, and they told us the context of people's existence. So if there was the crazy uncle or the funny, you know, cousin, they'd explain to us that history so that we could understand why they landed where they were. So I think because of the two of them, we, as Craig said, my brother said on the video, we were successful because of these two hardworking, good valued folks. And I wish my dad could be here to see all this.
How proud would he be of you? There was Craig.
He's the favorite, okay? And that's okay, he's my mother's favorite. She won't admit it, but he knows it, I know it. And I tell her all the time, it's like, what do I have to do? I'm the first lady, I live in the White House.
You've done the best you could do.
Do I want, you know? I'm taking her to China, I'm like, you know, she's meeting the Pope, and at Thanksgiving it's still, when's Craig coming? I don't care. But the thing is that I adore him too, so I can't be too mad at him. And here's the thing I want to tell you about Craig. He and my father treated me as an equal. And that's so important for fathers to understand about girls. It's like having a strong girl isn't just about having a strong mother. It's about having men in their lives who love them and respect them. So when my father taught my brother to do anything, whether it was boxing or learning how to throw a fastball or running bases, I was right there with him. And my brother encouraged it. He wasn't like, this is not for girls. We didn't deal with that kind of stuff. So having men in my life who loved me from the start, and then I had a whole community of men who loved me. I had my grandfathers and my uncles, one of who is here, one of my favorite uncles are here, and he knows who he is. I grew up with men who took care of me and looked out for me, so my bar was really high by the time I was getting out in the world. So second grade comes around, and it was the first time I was in a chaotic classroom, where erasers were flying and teachers weren't teaching, and I knew this as a second grader. And I would come home with my little lunch, my bologna, and I'd come sit, because you came home for lunch back then, lived around the corner. We'd turn on All My Children, and we'd watch the shows, and I'd have my bologna sandwich, and I would complain. Be like, Mom, this class, you will never believe it. We didn't even get homework, and I was that kind of kid, I was like, we are not learning enough in this class. How will we make it in third grade? I was just kind of worried. It's like,
what were your friends saying who you brought home with you?
They were all saying, because we had girls that came with us. We traveled in packs, and we were all complaining. It was like, this needs to change, and we were just complaining. And my mom did the mom thing of like, and we thought she was just listening and just, humoring us. But little did we know, she was back up at that school, and she was making some moves. And what happened was that a few of us got tested out into the third grade because of my mother and the advocacy of other mothers. But I tell this story because I knew even at that age that I wasn't being invested in as a second grader. And sometimes we like to pretend that kids don't know when they're being shortchanged and devalued. And I'm here to tell you that I knew that at second grade. So as we look at school inequality and things aren't right, kids know when they are not being valued, and it makes them feel some kind of way. And I was lucky to have gotten out of that classroom and into a better classroom, but that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have a parent at home who was also one of my fiercest advocates and understood the difference between whining and real distress.
So, but you did very well. Your older brother is at Princeton, and so you decide, hey, you'd like to go to Princeton. And you and I had a similar experience. I met a really cute guy who was at Stanford my freshman year of high school. I was going to Stanford no matter what. Even though he wouldn't be there anymore, it didn't matter. Somebody else like him would be there. But, right? But my high school guidance counselor told me the same thing yours said. He said, you're not going to ever get in there. So tell the story of what your counselor said to you and what it did to your self-esteem and what it did to your conviction to go forward anyway.
And the sad part about this story is that almost everybody I know, regardless of their station in life and what they've accomplished, if they're a person of color or a woman, they've experienced something like this. Somebody setting the bar of their dreams way low based on nothing but what that person looks like in their perception, because essentially this guidance counselor didn't know me, because we were at a big school. I had my first meeting. This wasn't somebody who was a teacher or somebody at work with me. And mind you, I was an honor student. I was senior class treasurer. I was an active student on campus, but this woman didn't know me. So I walk in and I say, well, what are you thinking about? And I say, I'm thinking about Princeton. She didn't ask me anything. She didn't really know my grade point. I don't know what she looked at. She didn't know my brother went because she didn't ask that. She just said, I don't think you're Princeton material. And she was wrong. She was wrong. And I don't even remember her name. I went back to the school just recently and the principal was like, she doesn't work here anymore. I was like, I bet she doesn't. But here's the thing for me that, and what I know can happen when kids hear this is that they believe it. And so they don't even second guess it. They hear an authority figure putting them in a box, and they accept that box. Me, I was just fortunately too stubborn. My flame was too hot already. I had the foundation of my parents and my relatives who showed me every day how smart I was. I had other teachers who, gave me the sense that I was somebody special. So instead of believing this woman, I thought, you don't know me.
Come on now.
You don't know me. And I was mad. My ego was bruised, but I took that energy and I said, okay, I'm gonna reach, but I'll show you. And that became the mantra of my life. I will show you, because that wasn't gonna be the first, that wasn't the first, it wouldn't be the last person that would doubt me, and doubt people like me. So I used that energy, and I left that office and I said, well, you're not gonna help me, so let me find people who do believe in me. And that's what I tell young people. It's like, you can let the doubters come into your life because they'll always be there, and you have to make the choice of who you're gonna listen to. Are you gonna listen to the naysayers, or are you gonna find the people who are there in your lives who are lifting you up all the time? And that's what I did. I worked around that guidance counselor, and I owned the fact that I was reaching. I write about this. I owned the fact. So I owned my story, and I told these admissions officers, yes, I'm reaching. Yes, I'm this kid from a working class community. Yes, I doubt myself. Yes, my father has a handicap, but this is all I know is to reach. If I want to go somewhere, I have to reach. And I think that passion, that focus, that energy helped get me in.
And did you go back and tell the counselor that
I didn't even bother.
accepted? Just walked on by?
Didn't even bother, because in the end I realized that I wasn't really showing her, that in the end, as I write, I was showing myself.
Yeah.
How about when you get into Harvard Law School?
What about that?
Well, did you feel like you were good enough then?
You still, it takes a second, because here's the thing, there is a stigma on kids like us, because, and I write about this in the book, this notion of being an affirmative action kid, right? That somehow, even when you do get in, somebody is telling you that you only got in because you're black. So there's always another bar, as I say. They set a bar, you reach the bar, they just raise it a little bit higher, and we always grab it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I learned going to Princeton, and I write about this, is that there's all kinds of affirmative action. When you go to these elite schools, there's legacy, which are people who get admitted because they have a history there. They are athletes, they're musicians, and let me tell you, universities should be looking for this kind of diversity because you want a fulsome experience. You want students who are from everywhere. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, why do we only have problems when affirmative action focuses on race? Why is that less? Because I saw all kinds of kids flaming out at Princeton. The athletes were drinking too much. The rich kid didn't know how to get herself up on time. I mean, there were all kinds of kids struggling. But that was good for me to see that at this place, this bastion of Ivy League intellectualism where I thought I wasn't good enough, I looked around and went, I can do this. And the same thing was true at Harvard Law School.
So you leave Harvard Law, you decide to return home to Chicago, you start practicing at Sidley Austin, and then out of nowhere comes a young man with a very peculiar name who and you heard about this man before you met him. You saw him on paper, and you were supposed to be his mentor.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the first time Barack Obama walked into your life.
Well, he told you a little bit about this story. He was late, but even before then, there was this buzz about this guy because he was a first-year law student, which big firms like that usually didn't take first years as summer associates. So he was like a hot shot. But I was skeptical because all these white folks, sorry guys, were all impressed with him, and I thought he's probably a black guy that can talk straight, and I'll be the judge of that. Because here, I get the folder, and first of all, it's Barack Hussein Obama. I'm like, who's got that name? I'm from Chicago. We have, Johns, and we have regular names. So I'm sort of like, well, where is he from? And then I look, and he grew up in Hawaii, and it's like, well, black people grow up in Hawaii. So I had sort of a nerdy image in my head about him, sort of pocket protector kind of, hello, I'm Barack Obama. And then all the white partners were like, he's great. So I was like, he probably has absolutely no flavor. So I had this image of him in my head already. So I was like, yeah, whatever. It'll be a fine summer. It'll go quickly. And then I had to call him on the phone. This is when at first I had a little hint that there might be a little something more there. So I'm calling this Barack Obama kid. I'm like, hello, it's Michelle. And he's like, hello. And he's got that Barack Obama voice that did not match the nerdy image I had in my head. And I was sort of like, whoa. I really was like, whoa, the heat was coming out of the phone. Yes.
I see the twinkle in your eye.
No, really. I was intrigued. And then he showed up, and ladies, he's cute. He was cute back then, he was cute. So I was sort of like, ooh. But I didn't let him know that it was ooh. I was just sort of like, come in, sit down. And in my mind, I was like, I'm not dating people, this is my advisor, but I'm gonna introduce him to my friends. He's cute, he's black, he's got a job, he's gonna be somebody someday. So I was like hooking him up with other people. But the thing I loved about Barack on that first day, we hit it off instantly. Because he was curious, he wasn't anything like the image I had in his head. He had lots of flavor, y'all. He had the swag even back then, and he had an interesting life and an interesting take on things, and he was open and honest and self-deprecating and funny. He didn't take himself too seriously, but he took the world seriously in a way that I hadn't seen. By then I was surrounded by go-getters, folks who were going to a law firm, they were going to be partner, they were buying their condos, they were going to make a lot of money. That was my crowd, right? Barack was talking about, organizing on the South Side and helping people find jobs. His whole conversation, his whole outlook on the world was just bigger and bolder. And we became friends instantly.
And then
he tried to date me, and he kept asking and asking. I was like, no, it's gonna be tacky. We're too black. We're only two black people there. I was like, and I would tell him that we can't date. That's so cliche. And Barack was like, I don't care what these people think. He literally was like, do you think I care what these people think? Which I like, because he wasn't like trying to impress the partners. So he asked me out. And that's all she wrote.
And since we want people to read your book, I thought it would be wonderful if you could read a passage from your book about your thoughts about Barack Obama back then.
You guys want to hear?
Want to hear it?
All right. Okay, here we go. He steered himself with a certainty I found astounding. All this inborn confidence was admirable, of course, but honestly, try living with it. For me, existing with Barack's strong sense of purpose, sleeping in the same bed with it, sitting at the breakfast table with it, was something to which I had to adjust. Not because he flaunted it exactly, but because it was so alive. In the presence of his certainty, his notion that he could make some sort of difference in the world, I couldn't help but feel a little bit lost by comparison. In my blinding drive to excel and my need to do things perfectly, I'd missed the signs and taken the wrong road. I was deeply, delightfully in love with a guy whose forceful intellect and ambition could possibly end up swallowing mine. I saw it coming already, like a barreling wave with a mighty undertow. I wasn't going to get out of its path. I was too committed to Barack by then, too in love. But I did need to quickly anchor myself on 2 feet.
What about that?
And again, if I was going to be marrying this guy, Barack Obama, by then, because we were going to be married, I knew that if I didn't get myself together, I would just be following his tornado. And I wasn't that kind of person, so I had to figure it out. I had to start like all over again and figure out what my passion was. And that's when I started journaling and started really exploring. And then I had to even confront the issue of whether I had the luxury to even think about passion. Because here I was, the daughter of 2 working class people, I write about this, who had never once had the luxury to think about passion, right? Passion is a luxury. How dare I sort of look at my high-paid salary and my sob and question whether I'm fulfilled? My father never once had the luxury of thinking about fulfillment. So I was struggling with all that. But eventually, Barack, my husband, pushed me and said, we can do this together. He said, you need to explore. So I really credit Barack with not only being a role model to me, but somebody who said, I'll have your back as you do this thing. And I don't think I would have been able to even begin exploring that if it weren't for him. And that exploration led me to you, Valerie Jarrett, who was a badass herself.
So we work together, you marry, and the next thing you know, your husband is thinking about politics. Now I have to tell you, the first night we had dinner while I was trying to recruit you to come and join government, I thought, well, he's extraordinary, and maybe if he's lucky, one day he might be mayor of Chicago. That was like the peak I could even imagine. When did he first start signaling to you that he was serious about running for office?
You know, politics wasn't always, it wasn't the thing on the table. For him, it was always change. It was, how do I impact the world more? And politics, the seat that, when the Senate seat opened up, it was really after he had run a huge successful voter registration drive right around the time Carol Moseley Braun was running for office, and he caught people's attention. So people approached him about running for state senate, and I think that's when it was sort of like, maybe I should think about this. And of course, as you all know, what was my reaction? No, don't, please don't. Thank you.
He didn't listen.
And you didn't help.
I knew that was coming. I know. I was a pusher back then.
You're like, maybe.
Yeah, it's good. I didn't think it through because what I didn't appreciate is that in the state legislature that required him to spend time in Springfield. And it's hard to do
Which
that.
is, by the way, for those of you who don't know Illinois, it's far from Chicago. It's downstate.
And you also share in the book that you two sought counseling. And tell us a little bit about what you thought you were going to get out of the counseling when you went in.
Well, let me say this about marriage, first of all. Marriage is the melding of 2 individuals' lives, and that's all cute, right? And Barack and I were in that mode where we were off doing our own things, and he'd have his job, and he'd be in Springfield, and he'd come back together, and we'd have our little dinner, and it was actually good to have that time away because we missed each other, and it was so great. And it was also good sometimes when he wasn't around, ladies. It was like, good, I get the television to myself. I control the remote. You know, it was all good until you have children, which is your first really joint project together. And it's a hard one, and it's an important one. And in a lot of marriages, and I think this is changing more and more, there's still an imbalance in terms of who's responsible for what. The burden still falls mainly on women. And even though we were both working people, because he was traveling most of the time, I spent a lot of time, I had to do the doctor's appointments and the summer program and what we were doing this summer. And if a babysitter was sick, I was the one juggling. And when we lost a babysitter, I had to find one, and I was exhausted. And that's when the tension starts building up. So we go to marriage counseling, and in my mind I thought, well, I'm going to bring him to marriage counseling, and the counselor is going to basically tell him to get himself together. Because I'm like, I know I'm right. So I'm going to bring you along to Dr. So-and-so, and he's going to tell you all the things I want you to hear. So I was like, okay, doctor, please tell him. And marriage counseling didn't work like that. The doctor kind of looked at me like, well, and then there's you. And I was like, you must not have heard the story right. I am perfect, and we are here for him. So the lesson I learned, for me, this counseling for me was a turning point for me personally, because I did what a lot of people thought. I was looking to my husband to make me happy. That was his responsibility to make me happy. And I realized I'm responsible for my happiness. I'm responsible for how I prioritize my life. And I can't be mad at him because he prioritizes his life differently and better.
So he was getting his workout in.
He got his workout in. You know, he's going to the gym. And instead of me being mad about it, I found a way to get the support I needed so that I could move myself up on my priority list. And I think we as women often do that. We don't feel like we are allowed to be our number one priority. And I think men have an easier time with that.
One of the things you did that I thought took some courage, but it was absolutely the right thing to do, you took Sasha on a job interview with you. So tell us a little bit about the decision to do that. Not everybody takes their daughter on a job interview.
Well, she was 4 months old and I was still breastfeeding. And I was ready to quit. This was when I had it up to here. It's like, I'm tired of the balance. I have 2 little kids now, and I tried working part-time, and I realized part-time work was a scam because I was just getting paid part-time to do the same amount of work in half the time. So I was like, I'm not doing that again. So I was ready to quit. So that emboldened me a bit because I got called in by the president of the University of Chicago Hospital, who had heard about me, and he wanted me to come in and consider a big job. And I thought, well, I don't want this job, so let me take Sasha.
Exactly.
I was like, okay, if you want me, then you're going to see all of me. So I walked up in there with a big stroller, and secretaries were watching her, and because I didn't think I had anything to lose, I asked for everything.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, you want me, this is how much I want to make, a lot of money, okay? A lot of money. Because I'm worth it, and I will have flex time, you know, so no part-time. I will come when I need to, and if I have to go to the Halloween parade, I don't want to hear about it. You know, because I will do the job. I can deliver a lot of work, but I don't want to be in mindless me. I was going off in that meeting. And
Michael's reaction?
He was sort of like, okay, I think we can do this. I think, and I was like, well, it's up to you, you know. Take it or leave it, but if you want me, this is what you're gonna have. And I left, thinking I'll never get that job. But I was sort of talking him out of it for me. And then I got the offer, and I thought, well, I gotta do this. That worked. So that worked. But what I learned was that, and again, not everybody has the luxury to make those demands. Not everybody works in those kind of jobs, but this is what I say to the women and the men who do: advocate, using that leverage to advocate to change the dynamic. I think is something we have an obligation to do, because that's the only way it's going to trickle down. And what Valerie said is that we can't be afraid to bring our full selves as women, as family members, to our offices, and boldly, as opposed to hiding it, because that's what makes me smarter than a lot of men around the table, because I can juggle. I do know what it means to try to get the grocery bill done and all of that. I bring a whole nother set of things to the table, but who knows that if I'm trying to hide it, because I think that that's keeping me down. And that we have to advocate for other women who don't have that leverage. That's our responsibility, if we're looking out for each other. And this is sort of at the core of why I'm writing this book, because what I learned in Iowa is what I think is true, period, is that what really connects us isn't race, it isn't a party, it's not religion, it's the stories that we remember, it's those conversations around the dinner table, it's the kind of bologna sandwich you had at lunch, it's the kind of furniture you're used to sitting on, it's the relationship with your grandfather, it's values, it's the life you've lived that you remember up here, it's those memories. And if you know that in you and you can tap into that and share that with people, that's what connects us. Everything else is just our stats. And we put too much emphasis on stats. Where did you go to college? How much money do you make? What do you do? None of that tells you anything about the person. It's those memories, it's the stories. It's not the stats, it's the stories. And what I found in Iowa, being Michelle Obama campaigning for her husband, Barack Hussein Obama, in a predominantly white state where people weren't used to city folks, is that by sharing that story, it resonated. You know, people were like, I see you, I understand you, because you're not talking about policy, you're not talking about to-do list, you're sharing. And that breaks through all of that. We just often don't get the chance to go into a stranger's living room and share each other's stories. We don't give people the benefit of the doubt that they'd be open. And I experienced that. But what I forgot was that I wasn't just walking around in Iowa, I was involved in politics. And politics is a game. And the more successful I became, the bigger my crowds became, the more of a threat I became, the more of an asset I became to my husband, the more of a target I had to be. They had to take me down to slow us down. And that's when the attacks came. And so it wasn't until I was beaten up pretty badly that the campaign finally stepped up and gave me the resources I needed. But no one was gonna advocate for me. Barack was too busy. He didn't know what I was going through, and I wasn't gonna complain to him. So it took that crisis for me to realize I can't wait for somebody to give me the help I need. I have to ask for it. I have to demand it. In the same way I had to demand my salary at my job, and demand that I have flex time, and to believe that I was good enough to get these resources. And I was able to turn it around because I got more control. I realized that politics is a game, that if you let someone, if you don't have control of your own story and your own voice, someone will take it and distort it and rip it up into a million pieces, and they'll lay it on your lap in a way that you don't even recognize. It's like, that's not even me. So I learned the power of controlling my story and my voice.
And you told that story at the Democratic Convention, and you reintroduced yourself to the world, and a few months later, your husband becomes the 44th President of the United States. Everybody remembers you in that iconic dress. Before we move on, how did you pick Jason Wu? How did you decide what to wear. How do you ever decide what to wear when you know everyone in the world is going to watch it? I remember the first time you were on The View, you wore a black and white dress, and before we got home, the stores were sold out of that black and white dress. How did you pick that?
You know, it was less the dress than the person who designed it. And I worked with a woman in Chicago who owned a dress shop and knew a lot of young designers. And I knew the power of the platform even as early as that. And I thought, the dress shouldn't just be a beautiful dress. It should help somebody. It should lift up a young designer from somewhere different. It shouldn't be just sort of the tried and true, the same old people who feel almost entitled to some of this stuff. And she suggested this young designer, Jason Wu, who was unheard of, and his story, he was an immigrant kid, and he was young at the time. He was like in his early 20s. And I thought, that's who this administration is. We're not Oscar de la Renta, we're Jason Wu. So I thought, whatever dress he makes, that's the dress I'm gonna wear, and he happened to make a beautiful dress.
When I had the privilege of being in the Oval Office, I would start to shake just a little bit, because I knew whatever we were talking about, and it could have been anything that was discussed in the Oval Office, we had to wrap it up by 6:28, or else he was going to be late to dinner. And he made it clear to us from the beginning that he wanted to be a present father, a present husband, and he'd been away for too long. And so since he commuted 30 seconds, it was our job to get him home. Why was that so important to you, that you not wait for him to get home?
Well, there's a few things. Number one, I thought it was important for Barack to be able to be plucked out of the pressures of presidency and have some moments of just normalcy. We started this sort of plan of like, this is when dinner time is, you have to catch up to us, because sometimes time can get out of hand for busy people and busy men sometimes. You know, 6:30 becomes 7, that becomes 7:30, and the kids are getting sleepy. And I didn't want my kids growing up feeling, especially as girls, that life meant waiting for the man in the house before life could continue.
You gave a speech right at the end at the convention, and we're going to play a very short clip of your speech supporting Hillary Clinton.
That our time in the White House would form the foundation for who they would become. And how well we managed this experience could truly make or break them. That is what Barack and I think about every day as we try to guide and protect our girls through the challenges of this unusual life in the spotlight. How we urge them to ignore those who question their father's citizenship or faith. How we insist that the hateful language they hear from public figures on TV does not represent the true spirit of this country. How we explain that when someone is cruel or acts like a bully, you don't stoop to their level. No, our motto is, when they go low, we go high.
And you're still going high. You're always taking the high road, right? But you take the high road. And tell us why that is. Tell us why you comport yourself, your role models, of course, but why is it so important to you to take that high road?
Because kids are watching us. You know, if I have to boil it down to anything, it's because we are role models. And it's not we, I don't mean just you and me, Barack, people that are on TV and hold places of power. Children watch everything we do. They're watching the person right in front of them. And they take this all in. And modeling how you want kids to react is what I think about. I mean, I think about my children when I respond, and how we approach issues. And I also think about, well, what are we actually trying to do? You know, when you go low, oftentimes going low means you're acting from a place of ego. You know, you're really just satisfying your immediate need to lash out. And rarely does that connect to a solution. And Barack is always, you know, that motto is his motto. I say that because that's how Barack operates. I mean, there are so many times when I just want him, like I know all of you, to just curse them out. Just say these things. And he's like, well, that's not the point. You know, the president isn't the president for his own ego. The president is the president for the entire country.
But thank you guys for rolling with us.
Yes.
Don't forget to thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. And leave a comment if you want to have a conversation. That's right. Down below, please. Peace. Peace. Obama out.